Welcome to the Process Podcast, a show on managing the ups and downs of our work lives, our creativity, of bringing meaningful and impactful work into the world. I'm Marcela Chamorro, your host, an executive coach specializing in empowering leaders on people-first teams like Doist, Honeycomb, GitLab, and more. With everyone that I coach, I work to maximize their performance, but also their well-being. And I'm also an online creator. Apart from this podcast, I write a newsletter called Self-Work, and I've created an online course called Courageous Conversations, which helps people master even the most difficult interactions. Everything I do centers around helping you do your best work, but also feel your best in the process. On this show, the Process Podcast, you'll listen to interviews with successful entrepreneurs, authors, founders from all walks of life, who tell their stories and share what has worked for them and what hasn't, including how to avoid burnout, when to put themselves first, what advice to follow when making a big life or business change, and more. Get ready to dive into topics such as community coaching, psychedelics, successes, and failures, and all sorts of tools, habits, and systems that can help you improve your performance and also your well-being. This is the second episode of the reboot of the Process Podcast, and I'm bringing you an interview with Nathan Barry, founder and CEO of ConvertKit, a creator marketing platform that, as of this recording, brings in over $40 million in annual recurring revenue. I first interviewed Nathan over 10 years ago, and I'm pumped to bring him on today to talk about how his journey has unfolded since then, particularly the ups and downs, the extreme downs, of the roller coaster that was building ConvertKit up to the 80-person team that it is today. I asked Nathan to be on the show after watching a documentary about him on YouTube, where he discusses his mental health in a very candid way. In this conversation, he opens up about the toll entrepreneurship has taken on his mental health and how he's taking care of himself today. Here's my conversation with Nathan.
So when I saw your documentary, it really moved me because most people don't talk about the things that we go through internally when we're creating. And first of all, I applaud you for sharing your story.
Thanks.
So thank you for doing that.
I definitely was very reluctant, which I mean, that some of that came through in the documentary, but the very first question that Issa asked me, Issa, our storyteller, is, which I didn't expect, is like, why did it take so long? you know, but yeah, I was
to
glad.
tell your story.
Yeah. Because she kept asking, can we do a story about you? And I kept saying like, no. I think I put her off for probably 2 years, maybe, before I finally agreed to do it. But she's
What changed your
persistent.
mind?
I think a couple of things. First, seeing just what a good job she and Henry did on a whole series of stories. It's not the first one they've done. It's the 20th or something. And so seeing that play out. And then also, I had this idea that I didn't want the spotlight to be on me. Like in the very early days, it was for ConvertKit, right? Because it's like indie developer doing, just trying to make something out of nothing. And I think it served ConvertKit really well for the brand to grow much further beyond me. And I even had this interaction where this was, I don't know, 3-4 years, probably 4 or 5 years ago now. I was going to Denver and I emailed some top customers in Denver and said, hey, I'm the founder of ConvertKit. I'm going to be in town. Would love to meet up. And someone was like, you're not the founder. What? Like they didn't say this, but their reaction when we did meet up for coffee, they were like, you're not the founder of ConvertKit. Like there's some woman that's the founder of ConvertKit. And it's because they had thought that Issa, who was teaching our webinars at the time, was the founder. Because that's who was most visible. And we ended up having a great conversation about it. And she looked at it. It's like, oh, okay, you are in fact the founder. But I kind of liked that. I liked that the brand and the team was growing bigger than my profile. But then we hired a new product marketer, a woman named Frances, she's amazing. She grew Teachable for a long time and then joined us. And when she came in, the first thing she did was a whole bunch of like customer research and industry research. And one thing that she found is that like people were connecting a lot with how I built the company and my story. And she's like, this is a big asset. Like a lot of people are, become ConvertKit customers
Founder
because
brand.
of
Yeah.
the story and the journey. And so we need to lean into that. And so the combination of Issa being persistent, Francis saying like, I mean, the market research says you should do this. And then the side, Issa, and then our VP of operations, Ashley, who's been on the team for, 8 years now or something. Both of them were really just encouraging me to like tell the full story, not just like, here's the chart that goes up and to the right, and here's all of that,
Yeah.
but like really lean into it, and have that like pay it forward with the story idea. Because it basically, they were both encouraging me, like, the world doesn't need another, like, I did A, B, C, and then I got these amazing results. You should do A, B, and C as well. Right?
Yeah.
Like, the world doesn't need another story like that. Like, the world needs an authentic story. And so, kind of those things over the course of a year or so, like, coming up consistently, that's what helped me to be like, okay, I'll finally say yes. It was a great experience. And then
And
I
I
got
was
to
an
watch
early
it.
customer, and I've seen
Yeah.
that. I remember your blog post that you put out in real time. Remember this? And you were like, "I'm going all in."
Yep.
I remember that.
Probably January 2015, maybe. So only
Yes.
eight
I
years
actually
ago.
looked up my invoices, and I think my first invoice for ConvertKit was like either late 2013 or early 2014. I don't remember, but
Yeah. So
I
that's the very, very beginning. The web app challenge, which I did to start ConvertKit, was January 2013 to June 2013. So you would have been, right in there of that, like the very beginning
yeah.
stages.
Yeah. And then I remember you going all in, and then that's when the chart started going up and to the right. And I remember you published the numbers and following
Mhm.
along, because you always publish your numbers for your ebooks.
Yep.
And I found that really inspiring. And then you started publishing for a ConvertKit, and that's when it started going. So, I mean, like, I've been following along online all these years pre-ConvertKit, and
Yep.
I've seen all the things how the team has grown. I think your website says 80
Yep.
team members now. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment and must be so fun.
It
Um,
is.
did they know that you were going through what you were going through back then? I mean, when you went through like that really intense mental health challenge,
Mhm.
was it still just you? Or was there
Yeah,
a
it was
few other
me
people?
and then a couple of contractors.
Okay.
So that was actually the time. Hold on, let me think about this. It was before the decision to go all in. And actually, a part of that decision was talking to, I can't remember which version of this I tell in the documentary, but maybe I tell both versions. But there were sort of two conversations I had with my wife, and this would be late 2014. So like 18 months, 2 years into ConvertKit, and this decision to like go all in on ConvertKit or shut it down. Because basically 2 years in, revenue is actually declining. And the version of the conversation that I remember is talking to my wife and saying, like, I think we should do this. Like, we go all in and make it happen. And she was saying, basically she was on board. She was like, yeah, worst case scenario, like we could sell the house we just bought. We could move back in with her parents. Like we could figure it out.
Children.
Yeah, with a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old, 4-month-old. And so something like she walked through her worst case scenario. Like if we go all in, put our savings into it and this doesn't work, this is her worst case scenario. And I was like totally shocked by that, because I was like, no, my worst case scenario is that I get a job as like a software designer at a company making, $80,000-$90,000 a year or something, and we'll be just fine. Or I go back to the ebook world or something else, right? Like,
Tim Ferriss actually talks a lot about that, about writing out your worst case scenario and how to walk yourself back from it. Like that's one of the exercises.
Like the
that
fear setting.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and saying like, okay, what am I, like actually naming what am I truly afraid of? So what was powerful for me in that is I was trying to decide like, okay, should I go all in? Because then I might end up in this spot. And is that okay? And my wife Hillary was saying like, should you go all in because we might end up in this spot, which is way, way worse. And she's like, yeah, that's totally fine. We can work. And someone was like, oh, when your, I guess, pain or risk tolerance is significantly higher than mine, then all right, that's very free. And so that was the support and permission that I needed in order to go all in. Now, what was interesting is like a few years later, after ConvertKit had taken off, and we'd probably grown from like less than 2,000 a month in revenue to well over 500,000, and and paid off. We were talking about that conversation, and she remembered it differently because like she remembered all the things that she was thinking but didn't say. And there was one side of it where she said, like, I remembered everything that she had said, and she remembered that the same way. But what she hadn't said is, this is the first thing that she had seen me have like a spark or interest towards
More
in
than your ebooks.
in like 6 months. Because like, to back up a little bit, for anyone who hasn't watched the documentary, I had like the most prolific time of my life, right? I wrote 3 books, wrote 1,000 words a day for 600 days in a row. And then we
I
built
had your
out
app. I just remembered your Commit
Commit.
app. I had that app.
Yep.
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
Wow.
you had it all. So I had that streak going. I had started ConvertKit. That had gone well. I'm probably making 250,000 a year off of ebooks. And it was just tons of momentum going really, really well. And then I remember my goal was to make 250,000 for the year. In January, February, and March of that year, I'd made almost $50,000 a month. And so I was like, I'm way ahead of pace of my goal.
Yeah.
And so from maybe the 4-hour work week perspective or something, I was like, I'm going to take a step back. We bought a house. I decided to be the general contractor as we remodeled it. We had a new baby. All of that, bunch of things happened at once. And what ended up happening is I woke up one day with a rash down my leg. And I remember calling my brother because he's a physician's assistant. He first I went through did we change laundry detergent? Do I have an allergic reaction to something? And I called him up and I went, and I described it to him and he goes, does it follow a dermatological distribution? And I was like, I have no idea what that means.
More detail, please.
Speak English. He's like, just Google it. And so I Google it and it shows, and it's basically does it follow the pattern of your nerves? And so I Google that image and, and it shows the pattern of your nerves in your body. And I look and yeah, it completely does. He's like, you have shingles, go to the doctor. And
Which is
so
incredibly painful.
Yes, it wasn't at the time. It was just annoying. I went in to the doctor and I was in this mode. I had a 2-week-old baby. Well, so the question they asked was yep, you have shingles. Is there anything in your life that causes elevated stress? And I was like, yeah, I'm remodeling a house that we just moved into. I have a 2-week-old baby. I have my self-employed business that I'm running and all of that. And the doctor laughed. I didn't think it was funny, but they laughed. They're like, yep, that'll do it. And so they prescribed antivirals and then painkillers. And I don't I've broken my leg before and a bunch of painkillers, and I don't like the serious painkillers. How I wanted mental clarity, and that really can mess with that. And so I took the antivirals prescription but declined the painkillers prescription. And they're like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I'll take Tylenol. That was at 10 in the morning. At 2 p.m. I called them back and was like, oh,
Please.
I'll take the painkillers prescription. And they're like, oh, we already called it in. We knew you were going to want it. And we just said we won't try to convince him in the moment. We'll just
It's a good doctor.
wait until his body tells him that he does need them. But what ended up happening is kind of 2 things. The end result is I spent 6 months not really working. I would try to sit down and work. I felt like I couldn't. I didn't have the ability either because of pain or brain fog from the painkillers. And then something from a mental it's really important to understand where you get your self-worth.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I got a lot of my self-worth from the work I accomplished, right?
And I think just to set like the stage for that, you were, as well as I was following along your journey, there were many people that were
Yeah.
following along your journey in that moment. And now there are very prolific creators making a lot of money on the interwebs. But I don't want to say it was the Wild Wild West back then, but you were one of the first people to publicly say, look how well this is going for me.
Mhm.
And I can see how quickly that can get wrapped up in, and you were very young as well, which
Yeah,
added
I would have
another
been
element of
24.
like inspiration,
Right.
to that story. So yeah, I can see where that can happen.
Yeah, so I ended up sort of, uh, it's often in it's important in life to think about vicious cycles and virtuous cycles
Mm.
because they can feed each other. I talk a lot about flywheels now, and
Yeah.
flywheels can both have this a similar thing of, um, you have these cycles, but a virtuous cycle is like the more you're doing, the more you learn, the better results that you're getting, the more opportunities you have, which is the more you're doing, and so on. Um,
Yeah.
that's a virtuous cycle. The vicious cycle that I fell into is the more I tried to work, the like it, I struggled to get things done, which made me very frustrated, which made it harder to get things done, which meant that I tried harder and failed more, and I got to the point where I just felt like I couldn't. Um,
So
uh,
the mindset was just like spiraling
oh,
along with
totally,
your physical
yeah.
ailments. Yeah.
And so I spent probably 6 months in that place of uh, being quite depressed, like struggling with suicide ideation, all of that. And so when my wife, that other side of the story at that, like, hey, like having the little spark towards ConvertKit, um, and saying, hey, like, I think I might want to do this. She was the things that she said, but what she didn't say is like, maybe, like, sure, let's try anything because
Relief. She's
maybe this will
excited.
be the thing that like gets them
Yeah.
out of this 6 month
Mhm.
um slump. And it was not an easy journey out of it, but it ended up being an important part of that. And so that was a whole part of the story that I finally got to tell in the documentary, very reluctantly. But it was good to get that out there because I think now creators are so open with so many things of the businesses that we build and the results, and you get to see the follower accounts and
Yeah.
whatever else, the conference speaking gigs. Um, but you end up feeling this disconnect between you're like, oh, she's out there living this perfect life, and um, I'm over here trying to do similar things and struggling with like the business results and mental health and everything else, and it just feels like this big disconnect. When in reality, like the person living the perfect life is probably struggling with many of the same things.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why I feel so passionately about this podcast, which is a virtuous cycle for me.
Mhm.
Um, the more people I talk to about managing the ups and downs of like their work life or their creative life, the more, first of all, it's almost like it's not even personal research. It's almost like personal coaching for me. Like I've recorded 8 episodes thus far of this season. You're my ninth. And I
Mhm.
already have so many notes of like, David Spinks said this that really helped me. And of course, I'm doing it to help others and to publish them, but it's also helpful to me. Um, what I am curious about is, all right, so ConvertKit takes off, and then you have a new set of challenges, right? Of course, they're
Yeah.
exciting challenges, but at the same time, it is still a challenge to go from you and a few contractors to 80, to go from 2000 MRR or whatever to 500. All of that growth implies new learning curves, new mindset challenges. How did that play out for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, there was a bunch of different moments and thresholds in it. Um, when I write a year in review post every year, I always title it something. The year, I like the TV show Friends, and they have this title
The one
format
that,
for every episode where they say the one where or the
yeah,
one with, you know. whatever, right? The one where Ross and Rachel have a baby, or the one, anything like that.
Mhm.
And so for my annual review, I always title it the same format, and it's like the year that whatever. And I think it must have been 2016, something like that. ConvertKit had grown a lot. 2015, we'd grown from 2,000 a month to 100,000 a month. In 2016, we were growing. We ended up growing 100,000 to 500,000 a month that year. So it's just absolutely wild. And I had this moment where we had our first team retreat, and we had 21 people on the team, and we got everyone together in like this big cabin in the mountains of Idaho. It was amazing to meet people for the first time. Some people we'd been working together for a couple of years. Others had joined like a week or a month before.
Mhm.
But we were all meeting for the first time, working together. And that first night, we all gathered together like in the big living room of this cabin. And I was enjoying that moment. And then I realized like everyone's waiting for something. I'm waiting for something too. Like who's going to, like we're all gathered. Who's going to talk?
Mhm.
Who's running the show here? And I had this moment of realizing like, oh, that's me. They're waiting for me. And so I titled that year in review post, the year that I became CEO, right? Of actually stepping into a new role, right? It's a very different role to go from an indie hacker working on, yourself or with 3 or 4 other contractors or full-time team members to like, oh, I now lead a team of 20 people that's now going to be 30 and beyond. So there's been a ton of skills to build in that. And a lot of it hasn't been natural, right? Like I'm not the person who I'm like, we hired a new webinar producer. His name's Shiv. He's amazing. And the first time he came to a team retreat, you were like, right, you are used to being the life of the party. You make everyone excited. You have this level of energy, and that is like built into your personality. And like you're not having to work for this. I'm the person who's like, okay, here we go. Let's turn it on.
Have
And
yourself up. Yeah.
yeah, and let's show off.
But you do it. Something that I do want to call out is from everything that I can tell online is that the culture at ConvertKit is very people first. And I'm very drawn to that kind of culture, obviously. But having worked in a people first culture before, I recognize how much of a blessing that can be for each of the individuals that is involved in the culture, like those 80 plus their families, et cetera. So that's a whole nother skill set. So you have a lot of intentionality, even if it's not something that comes natural to you to turn it on and be the one leading, the gathering or whatever. You built those skills intentionally, which is a lot of people don't do.
When I build systems and rituals as well, and they're well documented. So for example, if you take something like a team retreat, we have very specific things that we follow. Like even to the first night of a team retreat, this got established gradually over time. But one of the things that we do is we gather the whole group for profit sharing and celebrations. And so what we deliberately do is we kick things off just by like shouting out around the circle, like things that we accomplished over the last 6 months. It's not specific people necessarily, but it's like, oh, we shipped this feature, we landed this customer, we pulled off Craft and Commerce, our event, any of these other things. And just, we're such a hard driving team that it's easy to like always think about what's next or what's not going well and how do we fix it. That's an important ritual for us to like pause and celebrate what we accomplished over the last 6 months, who we added to the team, who we promoted, any of those things. And then we do a like a moment of celebration, we go from celebrations and we go into profit sharing, which is a key part of our culture of basically this idea that we exist to help creators earn a living. That's why the company is around. We're creators as well. And so we should get, substantial profits from them. So more than half the profits that ConvertKit generates goes to the team. And so we have this moment where we pass out cards to everybody and they open it and it's got handwritten notes from all the execs And then it has their profit sharing amount in it. And everything is calculated from a formula. So you can sit, the person you're sitting next to, you can see like, oh, we both got $15,000 because we joined the team at about the same time.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that we do there is we just go around, like whoever wants to share talks about either what they plan to do with the money or what it means to them. And it helps bring people together, like helps you understand the journey that other people on the teams are on. So for example, at this last one, you had everything from someone being like, I'm using profit sharing to buy this Gucci belt that I wanted, and you're like, all right, that's awesome. Someone else is like, I just paid off the last of my student loans. Someone else said this like finishes out the down payment for the house that I'm buying for my grandmother. Someone else said this is like lets me buy the investment home that I've been wanting to do. Like you get this whole range of things, and they range from like fun and goofy to like, serious and meaningful and like almost make you want to cry because you realize like your work played a role in someone achieving their goals. But all of this is planned out, and even down to, I have a document in like a standard operating procedure for how we do this section of a team retreat. And I can give that to my event planning team and say, okay, this doesn't happen in a ballroom. This happens in a circle. It should be comfy. There should be pillows and blankets. It should be, outdoors. Like, can we get the lights like this? Can we, all of these things. And there's photos of here are the times that we've done it really well. Like this is the kind of setting to emulate. And I think that level of learning from each time it goes well, learning from things I'm like, oh, I tweak this next time and writing it down means that I can create these experiences the way that I want without a lot of work. And it doesn't require me to like really turn it on and have that right energy that day. Like I could have an off day and still facilitate that really well because it doesn't rely on me and it's so well documented and planned out.
And that's one of the skills that you said that you worked on. But like you mentioned at first retreat, you said it was like 21 people. Now you got 80, right? And then it's not just retreats, it's managing all of the work that goes into shipping new features to customer service, etc. At the point that ConvertKit is right now, which is it's really incredible to see, like to think about what it was like just Nathan on a computer and, in the beginning to what it is now.
Yep.
What to you is like the next frontier?
Yeah. Well, so ConvertKit has had a single business model of subscription revenue, pretty typical software as a service for the first 9 years that we existed, something like that. And then last year, I guess 2 years ago, we started to change it a little bit where we kept the core and we added on payment processing. That's a new revenue stream for us. Allowing people to sell digital products through ConvertKit Commerce.
Yeah.
And then we added in our sponsor network, which is basically us saying, hey, if you want to sell sponsorships in your newsletter, we'll do it all for you. We'll negotiate the deals, we'll handle all the reporting, the ad copy, everything. And then from there, we really added this. Well, we acquired a company called Sparkloop. And what that allowed us to do is add in this marketplace for growing your newsletter and earning money. So instead of paying Facebook to, for ads to grow your newsletter, you can pay other creators. And so in like an 18-month period, we went from being, this is the way the business operates, of a bunch of siloed customers all getting a service and value, to now it's all networks. It's all about how can we connect creators. And so the next phase of everything in the business is really, about networks and building up our creator network and connecting, seeing what magic can we help happen by connecting other creators with each other. So it's kind of fun, like exactly 10 years in to be working on basically ConvertKit 2.0. It's not like an iterative, iteration of it, it's a fundamentally different way of operating. And going back to our mission of we exist to help creators earn a living, like now we're just paying out millions and millions of dollars directly to creators every month. Whereas before we're like, oh yeah, we'll help give you the tools to help you earn on other platforms or something like that. But now it's like, no, we just straight up pay creators. Last month was $2 million and it's growing fast. So I think that's the next thing for ConvertKit. The next thing for me is really figuring out like an entirely new set of skills to run basically two-sided marketplaces, which is a fundamentally different type of business. So we'll see how that goes.
As you speak, I see like the excitement in your face, but I'm also curious. Because sometimes excitement, I don't want to say it's going to wane, but sometimes it's not enough to withstand like the hardships, along the path, like nothing is smooth. I'm curious what you do to prevent any like mental health challenges. Like what is kind of, you mentioned rituals and systems for ConvertKit. What about for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different things. The first thing is trying to have a little bit of space from the business. Now with a team of 80 people, my individual effort can't have that much of a impact on the business. If there's 5 people and you put in twice as much effort as before, like the overall output in the business is probably up 30, 40, 50% if you did that. Now, when there's 80 people, if you put in like or Herculean effort, right, and you go all in, maybe overall output in the business increases 5%, 2%. It's going pretty small. It's more than a drop in the bucket, but like not by a lot. And so something that I've been really trying to do is take a step back and spend more time thinking strategically about how the business operates, where the bottlenecks are, the next strategy, what company we're going to acquire. And so for that, it's not only time and space, but also having the right tools to help process ideas. And so like, I'm a huge fan of executive coaching, and I've worked with the same executive coach for, 4 years now, 4.5 years. And that it's basically, people say like, oh, I just need time and space to process this. And it's like, yeah, that's right. You do. But also, wouldn't it be great to have a facilitator for that?
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like, oh no, facilitation is for like group sessions, and it's like, okay, but let's say that, all of your ideas that you can't pin down and you don't know how they fit together. What if someone was there to help you do that? Not through advice necessarily, but through great questions. And so that's been huge for me, of the forcing function, basically every other week of like, okay, what are the biggest problems that I'm trying to figure out? And then to get out and operate on that level, basically, and to try to sort them out. So those are the big things I would say at this point is time and space, working with an executive coach, and then really investing in the right leadership team, and then coaching and developing them.
Yeah, because the space, you said ConvertKit 2.0 is fundamentally different, right? And the space is also fundamentally different than it was, 5 years ago. There was like that morning brew change. You know better than me because you're in this space 100% of your time. But I feel like there was this morning brew change. And then now there are like this, the acquisitions of newsletters and like this whole other vibe when it comes to creator life. So that's a whole different ballgame, it feels. How do you think about kind of navigating that?
Yeah, there's all kinds of things happening, right? So we've always had a ton of competition in the sense that the email marketing industry is
absolutely
very,
there was
very
MailChimp and like,
like you and I have been around the space for a very long time. So we could probably rattle off.
I came over from MailChimp a million years ago. Yeah.
Probably 20 companies or more that are doing 10, 20, 30 million plus a year in revenue. There's a bunch that are 100 million, 200, MailChimp's $1 billion a year in revenue. So if you think about, I tell this to the team, we're 40 million a year in revenue. MailChimp's $1 billion a year in revenue. So we're not 40% of MailChimp's revenue, we're 4%, know? And so when you think about the size of the market, it's huge. There's all these other companies, ActiveCampaign and Klaviyo and Infusionsoft and whoever else, right? They're all wildly successful businesses way beyond our scale. But we'd never had direct competitors before, right? We had companies that cared about the creator market as part of their broader thing, or companies like MailChimp that didn't care about the creator market, but happened to have a huge portion of it just because they had a huge portion of the overall market. And so it was really the shift in the last probably 3 years of having companies like Flowdesk, Substack, Beehive, some of these others that are new and carving off a different slice of the creator market specifically. So it's interesting, for years we felt like we had direct competitors, but really we were directly competing for a market that they indirectly owned.
Yeah.
And so it's been really interesting the last couple of years and a big pivot for us to have these direct competitions from like creator focused companies like us. And so it's interesting of like this switching from being the underdog to being careful to not become the incumbent, And so like just thinking about, okay, what skills and traits did we have in the early days that allowed us to compete so effectively? And how do we make sure that we maintain them? Like one thing that we deeply believe in is building the best product, right? Like I've seen companies that have amazing marketing and mediocre product, and eventually that stalls out a bit. And so I think of marketing as an amplifier on a great product. And so our velocity that we can improve the product is really important. So we make sure that we ship at least one meaningful feature every single week, no matter what. And that's been a habit that we've established in order to, make sure that we stay competitive for a very, very.
So ConvertKit 2.0, like when is that happening?
It's happening right now.
It's happening right now. Okay.
Yeah. So our sponsor network has been out for a year. That was probably the first time it's like, well, hold on, this is different. No email marketing company has ever launched a sponsorship network before. Like that was the very first time it had been done. And then we launched our creator network, which is the free recommendations between creators. And that's been wild. Like I just posted the other day, I get 50 to 75 new subscribers a day from Creator Network, just from other creators recommending my newsletter. And I hear all kinds of stories, right? There was this creator who posted about how it took him, what was it? It was something like 9 months to get 500 subscribers. And then after he joined Creator Network and partnered up with people who are like really investing in growth, it was something ridiculous. He got 500 more in like a matter of weeks. And then at the high end, like Ryan Holiday for his Daily Stoic newsletter has picked up, I think it's like 125,000 subscribers in the last, what would that be, 5 months, basically. So he's getting 25,000 subscribers a month off of
hashtag goals.
Yeah. And he writes an incredible newsletter and has the profile that he has and relationships and everything. But like his newsletter is growing more than 10% month over month, based just off of Creator Network. And so that has been huge, and it's still so early there. And then with the acquisition of Sparkloop, now there's the paid recommendations where you can say basically, I'll pay other creators to recommend my newsletter, or I'll get paid to recommend newsletters.
For giving them space. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I love about that is there's no minimums. Like if you think about, like, especially when you and I started online, selling digital products was the primary way that people were earning a good living. But that requires some level of established audience and expertise. Like that's not the thing that you do 2 weeks after starting your newsletter,
Yeah.
What's interesting with paid recommendations is you could turn that on from day one. And you might only be making $5 a week off of it because there's only a handful of people coming in. But I like to think about maybe that creator who is super new They start their newsletter. They're really excited. They're growing it. They get their first 50 people. They've got paid recommendations turned on. Maybe they get their first 200 people. I don't know. But at some point, something happens in life and they stall out, right? Whatever wave they caught to get the first couple hundred people, they can't figure it out. They get discouraged and they're maybe thinking, is this for me? And then somewhere in there, in about a month's delay, right, they get their first payment from ConvertKit or paid recommendations, and it's like $48. And that's one of those things. Like, it's such an important moment to make your first dollar on the internet.
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say that.
A
Like,
total
once you
game
make a dollar online, you want more, you know? Yeah.
Of all the
absolutely.
drugs that we can get people hooked on, like, that's not bad. That's one that will actually help you pay your mortgage. And so I love the idea of that being the spark that gets them to go, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to push through this dip and turn it into something really meaningful.
Well, I think absolutely, because what you want really is to enable creators to bring their gifts to the world. And if it takes that $5, you know, if that is helping to keep them motivated and to keep creating, then absolutely, let's bring more of that unique gift to the world, you know?
When I think about so many stories that we encounter, when you read the story or hear someone talk about it on a podcast, it's this like perfect hockey stick, you know, or like consistent results over a long period of time and just that compounded. But when you dig in, if you actually look at those graphs, my guess is, and from what I've seen, is there's a bunch of stacked S curves, meaning that something did not work at all. And they figured out something that worked and it climbed like that sharp part of an S, and then it tapers off again, right? It doesn't work. And so you have to figure out those things. But ultimately what it means is every journey has a lot of dips. That's what's true for ConvertKit, right? That dip is getting $2,000 a month in revenue, and then it's sliding down, me wondering, should I shut this down? And so if we can provide, you know, the funding, motivation, encouragement for people to get through that dip and to get that $47 check for paid recommendations, you know, and them to push through the dip and say, okay, let me try this for another 3 to 6 months. Then that's going to be so many amazing stories and value for the world and value for the audiences that wouldn't otherwise happen.
We just talked about making some money per week for just starting out. I think people their interest might be piqued.
Yeah. So if you go to convertkit.com, then you can sign up for a free account. It's free for up to 1,000 subscribers. Really easy to get started. And then I think what's really interesting is Creator Network. So if you go to creatornetwork.com, you can see all the creators in there. A lot of people that I see failing as a creator try to make it a solo game. They're doing this on their own. And the ones that I see have the most success are the ones who realize that being a creator is a multiplayer.
Yeah.
Right. It's who you are able to build relationships with. That's why conferences honestly are so good. It's not because the content from the stage is truly life-changing. Like, I'm sure you'll pick things up that will have a huge impact, but it's the other people that you meet who have similar goals and that you stay in touch with them and form a mastermind group and, you know, keep encouraging each other and giving advice and all of that and accountability. That's where the power is. And so we're trying to create more and more of that in Creator Network, of basically saying, hey, not only can we team up and give each other advice and encouragement, but we can actually recommend each other's newsletters automatically all day, every day. And so then, you know, we're seeing like 50% faster growth for newsletters and Creator Networks. And so that's the thing that I really encourage people to do, is to say, like, you create an account, establish your newsletter, and then find people on the same journey and say, hey, let's partner up. Let's recommend each other and let's encourage each other. And then that will help you get through those dips.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Nathan Barry, founder and CEO of ConvertKit. You can check out their creator marketing platform at convertkit.com. Actually, my newsletter runs on it. And also, you can check out Nathan's work as a creator himself at nathanbarry.com. You can sign up for my own newsletter, Self-Work, and find all the show notes for this episode at marcella.co. That's MARCELLA.co. And on there, you'll find a free quiz that I developed called the Growth Quiz, which will help you unlock the next stage of your growth. What direction should you grow into next? What is the next step that you should take to grow, not just as a person, but also professionally? Check that out. It's completely free at marcella.co. Anyway, thank you again for listening to the Process Podcast. A very special thank you to Nathan for being on the show and for sharing all of his ups and downs with us. I'll be back next week with a new episode. Talk to you then.